By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what games you or your friends should be playing when trying out VR for the first time. Trust me, I've been there, and the last thing we want is for us or someone we're trying to bring into the fold diving into something that feels like a roller coaster of bad decisions. The games here are complete and polished, meaning no early access jank and little to no frustrating bugs. They're also designed with newcomers in mind, so expect minimal motion sickness and intuitive controls that won't separate you from your lunch. Lastly, these titles are available on most major VR platforms, so for the most part it doesn't matter which headset you have, for the most part. But first up is Metro Awakening, the newest release on this list. This is a game that feels tailor-made for newcomers to VR. Set in the year 2028, this game drops you into a sprawling underground metro system after a nuclear disaster. Humanity has carved out a fragile existence down here, and the developers nailed the atmosphere. You can almost taste the desperation in the air, but the story is so well written that it never feels overwhelmingly depressing. Without giving away spoilers, you'll play as a doctor trying to protect what little he has while battling mutated creatures and the kind of hostile people you'd expect to find in an apocalypse. What makes this game perfect for new VR players is how smooth and accessible it is. Comfort was clearly a priority for the developers. Motion sickness is kept to a minimum thanks to solid movement options and gameplay that rarely forces you into uncomfortable situations. Throw in the option to play seated or standing, sprinkle in a vignette that darkens the edges of your eyes during movement, and you've got a recipe for a relatively comfortable apocalypse. Plus, the entertainment value here is off the charts. From the immersive mechanics like grabbing items directly off your backpack to the unexpected ways the story develops, there's always something interesting in the works. This game even offers stealth mechanics which are surprisingly rare in VR and a refreshing change of pace all things considered. You get a little blue light on your hand that serves as a visibility indicator, glowing when you're in well-lit areas. It's a simple but effective way to gauge how well hidden you are. You can even throw objects like bottles to distract enemies and go for stealth takedowns, which is essentially just introducing your fist to the back of someone's head, but it gets the job done. Basically, these mechanics give you multiple ways to approach gameplay, so you're not always blasting your way out of a situation. For anyone new to VR, Metro Awakening is a home run, just as much as the simple but fun game Job Simulator, a game that proves that even mundane work can be incredibly entertaining in VR. Set in the year 2050, robots have taken over all tedious jobs, and humans are left to simulate them in a museum exhibit-like fashion. It's a quirky, lighthearted experience that's perfect for newcomers to VR, thanks to its simple controls, stationary gameplay, and boatloads of opportunities to mess around.
Get under the hood and get your hands dirty in our simulated mechanics shop.
Each job module, whether it's working in an office or as a mechanic, is essentially a sandbox. While there are tasks to complete, you're encouraged to mess around and interact with the environment. The freedom to deviate from work and experiment makes the gameplay not just engaging, but incredibly fun. For anyone new to VR, this kind of freeform play is an ideal way to get comfortable with interacting in virtual spaces. In fact, comfort is one of Job Simulator's strongest aspects. The game is designed for standing or sitting in place, so there is no movement-induced motion sickness to worry about. The mechanics are simple, relying on natural hand gestures like grabbing, throwing, and pressing buttons. Even for someone completely new, the learning curve is gentle and tasks are easy to understand. Plus, this lighthearted game doesn't penalize you for getting things wrong. If anything, goofing off is part of its charm. It's accessible, hilarious, and unlike your actual job, totally stress-free. And the game's immersion is surprisingly strong despite its cartoonish graphics. The developers lean into the job theme in an over-the-top way that's oddly charming. Almost everything in your workspace is labeled job something, and anything that isn't has a dad joke-like undertone. The futuristic setting combined with the silly attention to detail makes the experience feel immersive, and this is an experience that really will stand out, especially if you've never played a VR game before. Lastly, we have Half-Life Alyx, a game that many consider the gold standard for VR gaming. Now, I'll admit this one is a bit of a cheat for this list because it's only available for PC VR. But since most headsets can connect to a PC, it's definitely worth including, especially if you're looking for a full-scale AAA experience. For new players, Half-Life Alyx will undoubtedly stand out as one of the most polished, visually stunning, and beginner-friendly titles available. Like the developers of Metro Awakening, the devs here clearly put a lot of thought into making this as smooth as possible for newcomers. You can adjust movement settings to reduce motion sickness, and the gameplay itself doesn't require much physical movement beyond basic actions like aiming, grabbing objects, and solving puzzles. You can choose between teleport movement or locomotion, which is essentially just traditional joystick-controlled game movement. They're both intuitive, though jumping off platforms feels a bit dated compared to modern VR titles. Still, the natural flow of this game makes it easy for new players to feel right at home in some of the weirdest environments that exist in VR today. Gameplay mechanics in Half-Life Alyx elevate it beyond your typical shooter. The gravity gloves are a standout feature, letting you pull objects toward you with a satisfying flick of the wrist. This opens up opportunities like positioning explosives for creative ways of dispatching your enemies. Gravity gloves have been done in many VR games following Half-Life Alyx's release, but almost none of them do it this well. It's not just functional, it's fun to use, and the gloves have an explanation that adds to the immersion. Weapon upgrades are another highlight. To unlock upgrade stations, you'll solve a puzzle at a station the first time you attempt to use it, which adds a creative twist to a common VR mechanic. The puzzles in general are some of the most immersive you'll find in a headset, making full use of VR capabilities with tactile and intuitive solutions. Of course, as you'd expect from the premier AAA VR game, when it comes to visuals, Half-Life Alyx is in a league of its own. The visuals are sharper and more detailed than most VR titles, but it's the level design that truly shines. Environments feel lived in with layers of detail that make the world feel believable and lived in. Even the guns are meticulously crafted, arguably the best designs in VR.
Don't worry, it's unloaded. It's unloaded now!
That said, the game can be a bit demanding on your hardware with noticeable FPS drops at higher settings on mid-range PCs. Still, for most players, the sheer quality of these graphics at medium settings will provide an amazing experience regardless. Half-Life Alyx was the ultimate showcase of what the platform could do back in 2020, and it holds its own to this day. It's immersive, it's stunning, and it's packed with features that make it approachable even for first-timers. If you're diving into VR and have access to a gaming PC, like you've heard 1,000 times before, this is an experience you absolutely shouldn't miss. Now, all that said, for those of you just stepping into VR, I hope these games help you get started. I plan to make more content like this alongside my usual reviews. If you want to see more VR videos, including reviews of the games mentioned in this one, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Not only does it support the channel, but it also lets me know you're enjoying this kind of content. And until next time, stay immersed.